You have a photograph of yourself, maybe 8 months old, propped up on a blanket, staring at the camera with wide, unblinking eyes. Your family has told you the story behind that photo so many times you can practically feel the sunlight on your skin. You'd swear you remember that day. You don't. You can't. And the real reason has nothing to do with being too young to remember. Every person alive has this gap. Psychologists call it infantile amnesia, a term coined back in 1899 by Sigmund Freud, who noticed something strange in his patients. Adults could describe entire decades of childhood in vivid detail, except for the very beginning. The first 2 or 3 years simply weren't there. Not fuzzy, not distant, gone. Freud had a theory for why. He believed the mind was actively repressing early memories, burying desires and impulses too disturbing for a young child's conscious awareness to hold on to. He called the fragments that did survive screen memories, decoys standing in for something the mind wanted hidden. It sounded convincing for almost a century. It was also, according to nearly everything discovered afterward, completely wrong. For a long time, the simpler explanation seemed obvious anyway. Babies are too undeveloped to hold on to anything. Their brains are basically empty machines, still warming up. Case closed, right? Except it isn't, and an experiment from the 1980s quietly proved it. A developmental psychologist named Carolyn Rovey Collier tied a ribbon from a baby's ankle to a mobile hanging above the crib. Kick your leg, the mobile spins. Infants as young as 3 months figured this out almost immediately, kicking harder and faster the moment they realized they were in control of it. Weeks later, with no reminder in between, Rovey Collier brought the same babies back. She hung the same mobile above the same crib. Their legs started kicking before she'd even attached the ribbon. They remembered, not vaguely either. When she swapped in a mobile with slightly different shapes, the kicking slowed almost immediately, because the babies could tell it wasn't quite the same object. In later versions of the experiment, she found something even stranger. A baby who seemed to have completely forgotten the mobile after several weeks could have that memory instantly restored just by being shown it spinning once, briefly, with no ribbon attached at all. The memory hadn't vanished, it had gone quiet, waiting for the right cue to wake it back up. So the old excuse collapses. A 3-month-old can form a specific memory, hold onto it for weeks, and reawaken it on cue. If an infant's brain can do all of that, why can't you remember turning 3? What if the problem was never that the memories failed to form in the first place? The real answer showed up in 2014, and it came from neuroscientists Paul Franklin and Sheena Jocelyn at the University of Toronto. They were studying the hippocampus, the seahorse-shaped structure that files new experiences into long-term memory. In early childhood, that structure does something it will never do again at the same pace. It manufactures enormous numbers of brand new neurons, a process called neurogenesis. Picture your brain under intense, non-stop construction. New rooms being added by the hour, walls going up faster than anyone could furnish them. Here's the part that changes everything. New neurons don't just add space, they physically wedge themselves into circuits that already exist, and in doing so, they can scramble the very connections holding an old memory together. Imagine a filing cabinet where new drawers keep shoving their way into the middle of an already organized stack, scattering the folders that used to be there. Franklin and Jocelyn tested this directly in mice. Artificially speeding up neurogenesis wiped out memories the animals had just formed, ones that would normally have stuck. Slowing neurogenesis down, on the other hand, let older memories survive fully intact. The very growth that builds the architecture of a young brain turns out to be the same growth that demolishes its earliest contents. Doesn't that flip the whole story on its head? You didn't fail to remember your infancy because your brain was too weak to record it. You forgot because your brain was doing exactly what it was built to do at that stage of your life, tearing down its own freshest work in order to build something bigger and more permanent on top of it. There's a second piece to this puzzle, and it belongs to psychologist Patricia Bauer at Emory University, who has spent decades studying how autobiographical memory actually switches on. A memory isn't just a stored event floating in isolation. It's an event stitched into a sense of self, a timeline, a story you can later attach the word I to. Bauer's research shows that this narrative machinery doesn't fully mature until somewhere around ages 3 to 4, right around when language, a stable sense of self, and an understanding of time all come online together. Before that window, your brain was recording plenty. It simply had no organized folder yet labeled My Life to file any of it under. So 2 things were happening to you at once back when you were far too small to remember any of it now. Your hippocampus was flooding itself with new cells, scrambling anything not yet locked into permanent storage. And the mental scaffolding needed to organize memories into a personal narrative hadn't finished being built. Not a malfunction, a renovation, running on a timeline you had no say in whatsoever. Here's where it gets even stranger. Franklin and Jocelyn found the same neurogenesis driven forgetting in other mammals, in animals with no language, no sense of self, no birthday candles to ever remember blowing out. That suggests infantile amnesia isn't a uniquely human quirk, and it definitely isn't some psychological defense mechanism hiding shameful desires. It's ancient. It's stitched into how mammalian brains grow, a pattern reaching back tens of millions of years, long before anything on Earth was capable of wondering why it couldn't remember being small. Culture even seems to reach into this biological process and nudge it. Psychologist Harleen Hayne at the University of Otago in New Zealand compared how early people from different cultural backgrounds could recall their first memories. Communities with a strong oral storytelling tradition, where parents and children talk through the details of shared experiences again and again, tended to produce adults with earlier and more detailed first memories than communities with a more minimal conversational style around the dinner table. The biology sets the stage and tears down the scenery on its own schedule. The way the people around you actually talk about your early life seems to help decide which few fragments manage to survive the demolition. This is also why so-called first memories are so unreliable, even the ones that do survive. Ask people for their earliest memory, and a striking number describes something that, on closer inspection, never happened the way they think it did. Psychologist Elizabeth Loftus spent much of her career proving exactly how easily this happens, showing in a famous series of studies that entire vivid, emotional memories of events which never occurred at all could be planted in adult minds through nothing more than suggestion and repetition. A relative's retelling absorbed so many times it quietly fused with imagination until it felt exactly like a memory. Every act of remembering, it turns out, is itself a small act of rebuilding, not replay. Your brain doesn't hit rewind on a tape. It reconstructs the scene from whatever fragments are lying around, and it isn't always honest about the seams. With so few fragments left over from early childhood, those seams practically write themselves. Think about what this gap does to the way an entire family behaves around a newborn. Watch how obsessively parents now document a child's first years, thousands of photographs, video clips, baby books with a blank line for every milestone. Why the frenzy? Some of it is simple love, obviously, but some of it looks like an instinctive response to exactly the problem described here. A kind of unconscious insurance policy against a biological demolition everyone has quietly experienced, but nobody can consciously recall. You cannot trust your own brain to keep the footage, so you keep it externally instead, on a phone, in an album, in a shoebox, in a closet. It is, in a strange way, an entire industry built around outsourcing memory to a period of life that is guaranteed to erase itself from the inside. There's an odd side effect of all that documentation, too. Watch enough home video of yourself as a toddler, and something unsettling can creep in. You see a small person with your name, your parents, even your own mannerisms doing things you have zero internal record of. It can feel less like watching your own past and more like watching a stranger who happens to share your face. That discomfort isn't a flaw in your perception. It's an accurate read of the situation. That toddler's brain and your brain are, in a very real sense, not the same structure running the same software. One of them existed before most of your current wiring was ever laid down. So why does any of this matter now, decades removed from the crib? Because the process never fully stops. It only slows down. Every time you learn something demanding, a new language, an unfamiliar city's streets, a difficult new skill, your hippocampus adjusts, and evidence suggests adult neurogenesis, far slower than in infancy, but real nonetheless, keeps quietly nudging and reorganizing existing memory circuits. You are, in a much gentler and far quieter way, always mid-renovation. Ever notice how a memory shifts slightly each time you retell it, sharpening in some places while going soft in others? That's the same machine, just running at a fraction of its infant speed, with far fewer walls left to knock down, and maybe that changes how you look at the photograph. You see that 8-month-old version of yourself and feel a strange tenderness for someone you have no memory of being, and yet unmistakably were. The gap isn't proof that nothing happened back then. It's proof that something enormous happened, something so total and so fast that your own brain had to knock down its earliest rooms just to keep building upward into the person reading this sentence right now. Every adult you have ever met, every stranger on the street carries the exact same unreachable room somewhere at the very start of them. Not lost, not failed, simply renovated beyond recovery by a process older than memory itself. You still have that photograph of yourself, propped up on a blanket, staring wide-eyed at the camera. You still can't remember that day, and you never will. But now you know the silence isn't empty. It's the sound of your own mind building itself, one demolished memory at a time.